obelisk. The obelisk is the key.
I'm guessing this is the intro to the show.
This intro's over. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to The Obelisk.
The Obelisk.
New season 7, first episode. We'd like to welcome our guest, Antony Sammeroff. Antony Sammeroff is a psychotherapist and economic journalist. He co-instructs the course on economics of healthcare reform and for the Institute of Pure and Applied Knowledge. His ebook, 7 Big Pharma Myths Debunked, is available free from 7... You can look at the link in the description, everyone. Antony, welcome.
7pharmamyths.com.
There you go.
You make me sound like such a dork.
No,
That's like the most boring intro ever. I should have said
it's from your website.
My website makes me look like such a dork.
That's not my
And honestly,
fault.
you didn't mention the fact that I spent 9 months in India or like over a year in Mexico, and I'm like, okay, I admit I'm a dork, but I'm a really cool one. Okay.
So I wanted to do a short intro and then introduce you and then let you fill in the blanks. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Anthony, welcome to the Cosmic Salon. Everyone, we're sorry for being
the Cosmic Salon.
I mean, sorry that I just put up all the dots. Welcome to the Obelisk.
And he asked me when he joined, he's like, is this a Cosmic Salon or?
I don't know. I don't even know where I am. The thing is, what you guys don't realize is I'm multidimensional. So I'm both in the Obelisk and the Cosmic.
It's so funny. I am the reason we're late tonight. It's like dusk here and the ducks don't want to go up. The show's starting. It's just crazy. And then as we were talking a little bit of our pre-chat with Anthony and Jerry, the time, like we've had to reschedule this twice, but the timing ends up being perfect. But with that said, welcome to the Obelisk with Jerry and I, and tell us who you are. What are you about? Give us the more expanded version of who you are.
What is your deal?
Who are you, Anthony?
It depends on your level of analysis. It's like I am the one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively through the lens of Antony Sammeroff. On one level of analysis. On another level of analysis, I'm just a guy. Yeah, just a dude. So I don't know. I've got my fingers in a lot of bowls. I'm a counselor, a psychotherapist, and I've been doing that for over 10 years. I already started running self-help workshops and things like that before that. So I was coming to the end of my degree and I thought, what am I going to do? I like the self-help stuff, so that sounds like a good path for me, and I've been doing it ever since. Before that, I was a piano tutor. And yeah, I kind of got into libertarianism when I was in college, university, as we call it in Scotland. And I kind of did 2 degrees, like the undergrad that was studying, and like this other online degree, this at YouTube University, learning all about economics and stuff like that. So I started I was a theatre critic, and I reviewed. This is one of the best intros I've ever done before. I reviewed over 150 plays, and when I started reading the books that libertarians were recommending to people to get them into freedom-loving stuff, I was like, no one's going to read this. Like, this is too heady, and this is what. So I started writing articles, trying to write about these topics like they were a theatre review. Start with a punch, blah, make sure, use a conversational style, stuff that economists aren't known for. And that kind of culminated in me releasing a book, which was like kind of like a collection of essays on reducing poverty called Universal Basic Income for and Against. And that did fairly well for an independent published book and got me on some shows, and people just like the fact that I write like I'm talking to you, whereas everyone else writes like quite academic, and I kind of read people who are writing for a popular audience and collect their ideas and make them even more simple. So if you want to sample some of that, go to 7, the number 7, pharma, like big pharma, myths like romanmythology.com, 7pharmamyths.com, and get my free ebook and sample of my punchy conversational style. Yeah, apart from that, like a little bit spiritual, spent a bit of time in India, like, meditation, um, self-knowledge, self-inquiry, connecting with legit, real people, talking about real life stuff or what's going on in your life. Like, what do you actually think and feel? And I'm kind of lucky enough to have made that a job. So I did the counseling mostly online. Be yourself and love it.com. And that's pretty much all of that's my whole life story, if you're still awake.
I love it. And
Thank you.
I especially love people that step down from the ivory tower of intellectualism to interact with people in a more conversational and normal way. I have always found that higher I've always found that it's easier to talk at a level where everyone can understand and gets along instead of weaving through big words, big academic words. Those are fun and it's fun and it can be fun, but it doesn't allow for that playful spirit of the
Right.
common vernacular.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so I appreciate that in you, especially obviously you are an academic, so you are able to bridge these worlds.
Well, I think when people talk in academic language, it's a few things. One, it's lack of skill and facility as a writer. The most difficult thing is to write simply. And if you're too lazy, well, I don't know. Maybe it wasn't easy for me. When I went to college, I used to write big, long, clunky sentences, just like everyone else does when they start college. But and I learned especially from writing theatre reviews. And I'm always looking for a little device, right? So if I want to say something like, um, just to make it a little bit interesting, if I want to say being in poverty negatively affects health outcomes, I'll use a story like in the 1800s, infectious diseases were rampant in New York City because New Jersey, just across the Hudson River, was a swamp. So every summer, the mosquitoes would fly across the river and infect people with malaria and dengue fever. Everyone except the rich people, of course, they would just pack up their stuff and go somewhere colder. Now it's 2024, and being poor is still hazardous for your health. People in poverty are more likely to have diabetes, and diabetes is a sign of having is a risk factor for all these other illnesses. I'll find a story. Like, how do you make it accessible? How do you make it fun and interesting to read? So I like that you used the playful spirit of the vernacular, because that's what I'm trying to do all through my articles, all through my books, is what is the device that you can use to make this a pleasure to read? And humor as well. Can you use humor?
So you said something that interests me right away. So you were writing, and I'm, hopefully you still are, theater reviews.
Yeah, I did that quite a lot, from about the age of 22 to, yeah, I mean, yeah, sorry, maybe 20, yeah, for about 10 years, and then a little bit after that. I still do sometimes, but it's not like the center of my radar anymore.
Well, where I want to go with that is, so since you obviously like the theater enough to write about it and do reviews about it, you're familiar with the architecture of theater and
Like, go on.
and the production work that goes into theater. And so I want to take that into the woo, but is this a true statement that you are familiar with all those aspects?
I think that's fair. Yeah.
And so let's dive in. So when you're looking at, say, the theater of the world today, where we are collectively, from your point of view, from your seat in the theater, looking at it as someone who's observant,
I love it.
do you recognize certain themes in the world around us that you would say see in a production on an actual show in the theater?
Well, we're here trying to both discover and to determine whether this story is a comedy or a tragedy. Is this incarnation going to have a happy ending, or is it going to have a sad ending, a tragic one? I got quite shocked when I started going to the opera because I was so used to movies that have a happy ending, and you're like, oh, and then you go to the opera, oh, they're going to do it, they're going to save it. No, that's not how it works. Everyone ends up with a frown on their face. The hero dies, the heroine's aggrieved, the other people who were meant to get married are fucking trapped on other sides of the planet, whatever. Like, that's where this planet goes if we don't, like, you're the hostess of the cosmic salon. No one knows this better than you do, you know? We're trying to we're trying to we're working for a happy ending, so it doesn't have to go that way.
Right. It can, that's the thing with a lot of great overtures in the world. Like
Hmm.
war has uncertain endings, as
Hmm.
famously said in I think the second version of the Hollywood production of Elizabeth with Miss Kate Blanchett.
Hmm.
And so for the ad lib stuff, for the I'm hearing something. What is
Sorry.
that?
It's Mexican chatter.
There's someone speaking in the background. I'll mute when I'm not talking.
Okay, all right. I'm like, what's going on? Do we have a guest? Anyway, so right. I think that our point of view has a lot to do with how we perceive the overtures going on and the different story arcs going on, and what kind of story it is. Is it braided? Is it heavily narrated? What are we looking at? But when we're looking at the theater of the big world around us, it is darkly cast. And so when it's darkly cast, we have an opportunity for those that have a triumphant nature to step forward and rise into a place of, I'm going to accept this journey and I'm going to go on this journey. And sometimes it's, in good writing, especially, it's the most unlikely of characters. It's oftentimes everyone loves an underdog. And as an audience, as a viewing participant in the overall process, which is part of the process, being an observer, we tend to root for those. But the villains oftentimes don't get a lot of backstory if they're, if we're not looking at a major production of, you're looking at hours and hours. So that a lot of times the villains come in and we don't know necessarily what's going on. And I'll cite like The Wizard of Oz and how Wicked became its own theater production, right? So we get the story of the Wicked Witch and the background of all that. And we understand that, well, there's more going on here. And also like Maleficent, where we started to see, okay, so there's a backstory here. But when you cut to the Disney version of Sleeping Beauty, I think that's where Maleficent is from. We don't have all that backstory. How did she get to where she is? So here in the theater of the world around us, and I think I can safely say, at least for people that come to the Obelisk and also other shows that Jerry and I are both involved in, that people like characters like Klaus Schwab and these WEF characters and these world, Mr. Billy Gates and all that. These are great villains in the story. And to some degree, we have backstory on them, but they're still villains. Like every which way I look at them, they're villains. So, like with Billy Gates, I wonder what happened. We know who his father is. We know that. Oh, hold on. I've got a wolf situation going on. No, that was, I don't know what that was. That was someone, that was unhappiness. So we know that the villains look like genuine villains. Like they were just like bad seeds to begin with. And of course, everyone out there that knows their pop culture knows The Bad Seed is actually a movie from, I think, the 40s or 50s.
No, 70s. It was a book.
Are you sure? Because I think I thought it was an older.
It's like Jason
Jerry, look that up.
I am.
Because I remember it being right? Like in Golden Hollywood as a movie.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah,
56.
Jerry. Okay,
1956.
So
what am I
hello
thinking
out
of?
there. I hope my Robert's out there and can go, yes, girl. Anyway, so
I'm sorry.
No. I just, these are things that anyway, so that are born a bad seed. So when we're looking at this narrative right now, Anthony, that's going on, we can look at these villains that came in and they seem to just be villains from the get-go. And that's what I'm wondering is when you look at this and you deconstruct the theater of the life around us, some of these villains are solid. They came in as villains. They seem to have come from villains. So there's lineage there. And now they are holding control. They're reigning the reins of power. They are ruling the story. And so the most unlikely of heroes or heroines are going to have to be, I think, the anonymous ones out in the world in this kind of story. And there's Bible precedents here as well. And of course, there's Tolkien precedents here as well. Who but a hobbit, right? So how are you seeing this play out? Because the stakes are high. They couldn't be higher. The villains are old school lineage villains. They're dark characters. They're dark lords. And they are reigning supreme, and they have a history of reigning supreme with long legs to get us to where we are. But I don't see any real heroes or heroines out there that are rising like, say, a Superman or one of those, where I'm seeing our individual characters. How do you see this play running?
And I like that because I never like those stories that have a chosen one. I think the best heroes are people who chose themselves and through their own commitment, integrity, strength of character, which they develop through the story. They might not have as many qualities, but they work to develop their qualities. And I think it's that way that each person, no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. So in like Hindu religion, mysticism, there's this concept of using your nature to serve God, so to speak, find out what your particular talents are, and in some way commit them. I think this is not a Superman versus Lex Luthor type situation, or I don't really know that much about superheroes. It's more, a million tiny ants taking down a giant. You sometimes see the little people, these cartoons or whatever, where there's little people throwing lassos around the big giant to pull him down. But I don't know if thinking about it in terms of saving the world is even the way to look at it. Like I think finding out what your talents are and contributing them are, like I'm a writer. I think I'm pretty good at researching stuff and putting it in some simple language. So I do the pharma stuff, debunking, demonstrating that drugs do more harm than good and demonstrating what the alternative is. That suits me, my personality, my mind. That's, you're choosing yourself. When you learn about things, you learn a lot about something, you start to see, oh, there's gaps. There's some place for me to step into here where I can, I remember once I was over at a friend's house and we may or may not have imbibed some substances at one point, and we were having a conversation and he went, I am the one. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, I don't want to be the one. I want to be one of many. And I thought that was a really beautiful thought, and I share it. I think it's not, this isn't about the ego because everyone needs everyone. It's like we each need to be one of many. Everyone needs to step up and make whatever contribution is stamped in their heart and their nature. And that's how we change the world. And a lot of the things, it's not about changing, you know, oh, if only my neighbors thought the right things like I do, the world would be so awesome. We've tried that way for hundreds of years and it's not worked. It's like you can't think changing the world means changing other people. You become the best version of yourself. And then I don't know what happens. Either you get out there and you make some fabulous contribution, or you just don't find yourself in a reality that has supervillains in it anymore, eventually. Because all there is each of us, and all there is the present moment. So I don't know what universe you're going to disappear to in between now and the time when we next speak. You know, it might be a completely different one from me.
Yeah. Is it a need for contrast though in life? What's the synchronicity here with contrast? It feels like if everything is always going smoothly and aces and perfect, then there's no real need for growth or seeing what you're made of and putting the pedal to the metal to rise up out of struggle, out of circumstances that seem impossible.
Yeah, and it's hard to look at it that way because, well, first of all, when you're in intense suffering, it's almost impossible. But even when things are going well and you look back on your life and you think, oh, look, I see a running thread. Everything that was difficult in my life taught me some skill that I'm now pleased to have. Every experience, when you're in a good place, you believe everything is meant to be. But then you go, well, what about these people um, being born in Palestine and under that oppression? What about Yemen? Could I really be so um, selfish to think it's hard? It's easy for me to say, living here in Mexico at the moment, in Scotland, wherever I am, that, oh, when I look back on my life, all my struggles somehow make sense. But I would find it hard to say that to some baby that's deformed because their village was bombed with depleted uranium in Iraq or something like that. So, but in my moments of clarity, I feel like everything is well. And if we are eternal and what we come from is cannot be harmed, and we go back to it, what seems like a lifetime to you, even a lifetime of suffering, is just a moment. So I guess maybe it does all serve a higher purpose. Maybe it does serve your evolution to be put in situations where you can demonstrate integrity or cowardness. Do you sacrifice others to yourself, or do you take a more difficult path that is more beautiful but challenging, and develop your character through the voluntary embrace of challenge in the face of the temptation to do
So a couple things here.
otherwise.
I love what you're saying, and it has always been apparent to me that comparing your hardships to another's is never a good way to bridge
Mhm.
with people.
Mhm.
It further isolates people in general and compounds trauma and takes away from their own experience, especially these people that one up everything,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Yeah,
And
that's a silly
oh my
communication
God.
skill.
so damaging. So it's a thing there. But then I want to look at the idea of the nature of the human condition. And of course, we're just talking philosophy here. We're in this realm of philosophical discourse. And so the nature of the human condition, if we look back at all our stories, our mythologies, our literature, our arts, even the petroglyphs, there is a certain idea that we struggle here. Back in the beginning, you're struggling to get fire and warmth and food, and then you got to work together to make those things happen. And then as civilization moves forward, there are different struggles, and you see some come to power and take over others. And then in those stories, you have kind of the Robin Hood tale and the heroes that take away from the villains. And again, we already kind of talked about the villains a little bit. But the idea I'm getting at here is the human condition in general, without comparing your circumstance to someone else's, because we recognize the folly of that here. But it seems to me that no matter what, the human condition does entail a certain amount of agitation to bring us into a state of more awakened reality rather than just a peaceful, lovely, sleepy dream, which everyone loves. I love that. I love when everything's smooth and fluid and flow and all that. But it almost becomes like too easy. It almost becomes I don't know. I become suspicious in those modes of being myself personally, because it always seems like I am lulled into the poppy field again. And at what point,
Oh, I see. I
you
see.
know,
So you're saying when things are easy, you you kind of can rest into this more sleepy state of consciousness.
yeah, but for too long and
Yeah.
so we all need the reprieve. We all need the easy
Yeah.
bits, and we all need the beauty and the leisure and the love. I live for those things. I pickle in them. I relish in them. I ruminate in them. But at the same time, if you don't have contrast from that, how do you do anything great? How do you rise up and write a beautiful prose line about the contrast of some struggle, a heartache, someone broke your heart, or where does the real muse come into all this if it's all just in flow state and everything is perfect?
Yeah, I kind of, I guess it reminds me of the the kind of symbol of the cross, like with Jesus accepting his suffering willingly and as a model, like, some stuff, and when I'm in a good place, I do that. I've got challenges, psychological, emotional challenges, relationship challenges, and I really do think I'm learning something important from this. I'm glad for the opportunity to learn from this experience. Um, but it can be hard because you can really miss the poppy field. You know, and it's very difficult to want something intensely and not be able to get it or not see your chance of ever having it. And it's something in us feels so disconnected from life in the universe when our desires are unfulfilled.
I think a lot of us agree right now that things are in such an agitated state, and it's over. There's an extra amount. I mean, something big is going on. I think we can agree that we're at that point in the story arc where there have been twists and turns, and we're in the middle of finding out what's this next big twist, or how we're coming towards a crescendo of some sort. And at least it feels that way to me looking around. And I'm curious, so I want to know what it is. and we're already invested in our own stories and in life because we're here still, we're all still standing. And so it's making,
Allegedly.
yeah, I know, Jer. But just trying to make sense of what's gone on in the last several years, Anthony, and where it seems to be going. I think I'm wondering, what is your perspective on this? Because do you recognize that in the outer world, it is a new flavor, a new level of agitation that we are facing
Sure.
collectively?
Oh yeah. I mean, what the hell was 2020? I mean, I was like, I knew it was bad and that people were kind of sheep and followers, but the worst thing I had to worry about in 2019 was stuff like leftists are clueless about economics and they're driving us off a cliff, and like I don't know, rightists are of a complete like failure to understand what's necessary in order to conserve anything, or I don't know, stuff like that. I mean, I would take those problems back over what has become evident to us that is the real. I mean, so much of what happened is like what we call in Scotland a piss take, which is um just like how 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 can you coherently phone up your nephew and say, see if you're going to come to the family gathering, it would become good if you wore a mask because you're the only unvaccinated person there, and be like, and not be like, wait a minute, the vaccine's meant to protect me from getting anything. So are we allowed to say that word? Sorry, the lollipops are meant to protect me from getting anything. Like, you go into a restaurant, you have to wear a mask, you sit down, you can take it off and eat, but if you get up, you need to go to the bathroom. Like, so much of it seemed like, let's just throw crazy nonsense at people and go, dance, monkey, dance. Let's see how your mind justifies this completely stupid, contradictory thing that you hold true at the same time, and get you on the internet to say that anyone who's like, wait a minute, this is crazy, this is inconsistent, to say that they're evil or like the, it's
That's exactly what
crazy.
happened. That's
It's like,
it was a divide and
yeah,
conquer of the public and of the minds of the public to induce a cognitive dissonance where you're
the
more
likes of which has never been seen before.
never.
Like, I've never imagined holding so many crazy, like, it's like, I used to say, see, when I was in Scotland, I said the First Minister of Scotland was, um, yeah, she was up on television like Mussolini or something like that every night. We are going to do this and we are going to insist that this. And I said, do you know what? If she said COVID can spread by farts, and if you leave the
Yes.
house,
Yeah.
you need to put a dildo up your ass. People would people would be wobbling left to right in the supermarket, and see if you weren't wobbling left and right, they'd be giving you dirty looks like, "What are you doing? Why haven't you got your dildo shoved up your ass?"
And I'm thinking
And
about all the chicks who wear them just for fun
yeah,
are going,
Jesus,
phew, I dodged a bullet.
right,
Or I took it.
I took it.
The art of
right.
walking with a dildo in your arse.
That's why you got to get the small ones with the tail.
Together. Yeah. Or the ones that your partner can turn on and off by remote control.
Yeah, those are called love ants. The pink
Oh,
ones.
okay. Yeah. You seem to know a lot about these ones, Jerry.
I have a
Jerry.
vast and shallow knowledge base.
Okay. Excellent. So not
Anyway,
the
Anthony, so carry on.
Yeah, you're right. The extreme psychological operation that has been ongoing since 2020 is
unbelievable.
insane.
It's unbelievable how many people bought it. It's like, it's worse than the thing where they said one of the in mainstream newspapers, one of the passports of one of the hijackers on 9/11 was found at ground zero of the World Trade Center. I mean, do people actually believe that? And who would actually report that in a mainstream? It's like, it's so crazy. It can't possibly be true. And people can look at that and not go, well, that's fucking nuts. And yeah, and I think the COVID stuff was the epitome of this.
Yeah, and the reason that people didn't question it, I think one of the biggest reasons people didn't question it was fear. They were, first of all, they wanted, I mean, there's so many psychological things in here. People want to be part of the group. That's right.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
they
that's
weaponized empathy as well.
Yes, yes.
They weaponized empathy and said, you're obviously an incompassionate asshole if you do.
Yep.
Never mind the fact that Oxfam reported early on that lockdowns were going to cause millions of deaths in Africa.
Yeah.
Never mind the fact that people lost their business. Where's that they've spent their whole life building? Where's the empathy for that? No, we're going to focus on this one thing. That, it's nuts, absolutely raving bloody bats.
And it's still going on. I mean, there are over 60 universities here in the States that you must be up to date on your vaccines in order to get in to attend classes, even remote classes. Nuts.
And that's another thing. I mean, the fact that people actually accepted,
yes,
particularly when they said you've got to get it or keep your job, the fact that people didn't rebel against that. I've got one friend, by the way, who sued their company for firing them for not taking the vax, and the bastard settled out of court and he got paid. That was really, really fucking satisfying.
That's nice.
Fuck him. Yeah. More people needed to do that.
Yes.
So like, I cannot believe that people accepted that. At that point, it just went too far. I mean, saying you can't, and it's so interesting. There's so many levels to it. The fact that it was even by, this is the thing, right? see when I'm writing on pharma, my speciality is I use all main sources. I use all main sources. Mainstream sources. So what I do is say, look, I'm not saying it. Here's a document for the CDC or the FDA or the AMA or the Lancet or the British Medical Journal or the New England Journal of Medicine or JAMA. Like, their own fucking journals admit everything I'm admitting, everything I'm saying. So it's like that. It's like the complete abandonment of any freaking semblance of what even would normally be considered normal safety tests, or which aren't good enough, by the way, or normal efficacy tests, which definitely aren't good enough, by the way, or all of this stuff was happening already, but they just turned it up to 11, and no one went, wait a minute, right? It's one thing to say, even if you think lockdowns, even if you think COVID's dangerous, even if you think lockdowns will protect you against it, even if you think masks work, here's one thing. Is this the Soviet Union where you're only allowed to have one opinion represented in the media? Did no one stand up and say, look, okay, we're supposed to live in a free society with democratic elements to it. Surely you can have a debate on TV where one expert is for lockdowns and one expert's against it. No, what you have is one expert who's really, really, really for lockdowns and one expert who says maybe we should scale back on one tiny element of or be like, what the fuck? Like, why was this acceptable to anyone?
I agree. This kind of dovetails into what we were talking about before the show started about when the censorship started, because anyone who questioned the official narrative here, I'm thinking like the Great Barrington Declaration, for instance. Those doctors, Bhattacharya and I forget the other guy's name, I apologize to him, who wrote that, all the doctors who wrote that were immediately canceled, silenced.
Right.
There was no room for debate because they were deemed anti-vaxxers. You know, they got labeled as opposition and then canceled, and they had no place to really speak out about.
Yeah. So
Yeah, go ahead.
so why does that? Sorry, no, I'm sorry for interrupting you,
No.
but yeah, why aren't people suspicious of that?
Because they're brainwashed. That's the only good explanation, is that they believe in this fairy tale that was told to them by the media and the government.
So how much personal responsibility do you put on people? Like, where's the line between, well, you're just a complete automaton and you're brainwashed and you don't know any better, and actually, fucker, you've got a personal responsibility in life to vet the information that comes your way. Like, where do you place yourself on the spectrum? Like, how much personal responsibility do people have,
100%.
if any?
100%.
Okay, well then they're not just brainwashed then, because if they've got 100% personal responsibility, they're
So, okay,
yeah.
no, not everyone. A majority of the people I feel were definitely
Okay.
affected by the propaganda in the manner in which they acted to do that. The other people who didn't speak out or were just in fear for their jobs, or were just personally scared of the ramifications if they went against the narrative or whatever.
So I've got a couple of questions for you guys then. The first one is, do you think this is a good principle then, right? See if someone is just more like, well, I stayed in during the lockdown and I followed the rules, and like if you want to get a I wanted to get a vaccine, so I got it, but if you don't, that's fine. So we should take a live and let live attitude with them. But if someone was like on the internet going, you effing science deniers, blah, 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 like I hope you rot in hell, like to take the same level of judgment with them and say, like, you're personally responsible because you were out there calling people out and telling them that they were anti-science when it's actually you who didn't actually bother to do your homework. Do you think we should be more strict in our judgment of people who are more strict in their judgment?
Yes and no. I think, like, I definitely am in my head.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I take that live and let, if live and let live, sound like Biden, live and let live attitude, and just tend to ignore people like that because there's no getting through to them for the most part. So, and I might have misunderstood your question when I said 100%. I was in my head thinking it's 100% on them to snap out of their trance.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay.
It's not
they're 100% personally responsible.
No, the onus is 100% on them to be more discerning in what they absorb information-wise and content-wise.
And I think it's one thing if you really are sheltered and you've not been exposed to this information. But if you're the person who's had a couple of friends come to you and go, this is nonsense, look at this website, and you're like, yeah, whatever, you crazy anti-vax. Like, you've not got the same level of plausible deniability to go, well, I never knew any better. No, you had a friend send you the studies, send you a doctor explaining the studies, and you didn't even listen to it, or you listened to the first 2 minutes and put it off because you didn't know, you didn't like what you would have to do if the information was true. If the information was true, that means that you would have needed to become an unpopular person who stood up against the narrative, and you didn't like the thought of that, so you evaded being exposed to more information.
Yeah, or the only content they consume is the one that reinforces the narrative.
Right.
That they don't look outside their box ever. And when you have content that's tailored directly for what you consume, if you think about your Facebook feed, your Twitter feed, your Instagram feed, it's going to feed you things that are in your wheelhouse more often than not. So, I mean, you're not going to see dissenting opinion a lot, especially on anything but Twitter right now. If it's anti-narrative speech, it's gone. It gets deleted. you can't speak freely anywhere, pretty much except Twitter. And even then, it's
Yeah, it's hard to get reach as well. The thing
yeah,
is, I don't do well on Twitter, and I think the stuff that I post is really interesting and funny and cute um and thoughtful. But what does well on Twitter is people making like absolute statements like they are the law, because then people argue in the tweets commenting on it, and then people argue with the people arguing, and Twitter is just like a vehicle for people to argue with each
yeah,
other.
yeah,
It's like people who are very strident, and I can't be bothered with that.
yeah. I
So that in some way that's a bad thing. I should get some cantankerous asshole to run my Twitter on my behalf, and then maybe I'll
can't.
then I'll maybe get hundreds of thousands of followers, and I'll sell more books on Big Pharma, and then I'll reach more people. But it's just not in my nature. I'm like kind of a conciliatory guy when it comes down to it. I like to say, hey, look at this. This is interesting and true. I don't like to go, you bunch of assholes, like, and don't you know that it's just not me, you know?
Well, absolutes and platitudes are just, I mean, it never used to be like it to this extent. People used to enjoy a good debate and just good fodder for talking about stuff, even heated things. We could come together and talk about heated things and maybe then have a laugh or a drink afterwards or agree to disagree. But everything now is the world of absolutes. And this is the science, and you can't question that science when obviously we've lost sight of what science is, to be honest, and the cult of scientism, which has rose up out of this. It sprung up out of this
It
like a
eclipsed
mushroom out of a turd.
It eclipsed
Right.
science.
Yeah, and
It's carry on.
yeah, well, I mean, like I've got a chapter in the book 7pharmamyths.com on bad science of medicine, and the one in the next book that's going to be a paperback is going to be even bigger, because it's like science already wasn't really going on in medicine. Almost all the studies are funded by pharmaceutical companies, and
Yes.
even then they've got so many ways to manipulate data. I mean, one of the worst things I heard was from Anatomy of an Epidemic, where for antipsychotics, this is what they called science. They took a bunch of people who were already doing reasonably well on the drug, took them off the drug, then a couple weeks later, put half of them back on the drug and left the other half and randomized the other half into what they called a placebo group. So they took a bunch of people who were withdrawing from a drug and said, oh, they did a lot worse than the people who are on the drug, and then said that was science. There's so much. So like this is just kind of a lot, and what we take to be science is like founded on false precepts. Like not all information requires like a double-blind study. Like you need to look at sort of first-hand experience of life and things like that, and say like what is, say, psychology as a science. You what it is people introspect on themselves and say, I look at my mind and I say that it works like that, and I see that it works like this, and then they put it out there, and a bunch of other people go, oh yeah, like actually the mind does work like that. When I self-observe, that's interesting and weird, because it's not like people are not like iron. Like iron always melts at the same heat and it evaporates. Yeah, and it has the same conductivity, and all of its properties are the same, right? So iron always behaves the same under the same conditions. But I spank one person and they're like, ah, don't, you're assaulting me, and another person they're like, oh, that's kind of hot and sexy. So it's like the people are not like nature. Sorry, well, I mean, people are nature. What I mean is natural elements. So you can't do the same science when it comes to economics and psychology and the humanities as you can when it comes to the natural sciences. And so we're kind of limited in our scope of understanding by this idea that, you called scientism or what. There's one way, and it's research and it's studies and it's blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, you don't actually understand that there's a much broader array of tools at our disposal when it comes to understanding this phenomenal universe that we live in.
And see, I agree. And this is what makes the physiology and the psychology and the all the stuff that makes humans fascinating,
Right.
and trying to put them into a realm of the natural sciences where you can count on the properties to be the same as they always are, as they're predictable. This is what makes us dynamic. This is what makes it interesting. But then you get usurpers that come in, say the psychological field, that comes in through a relationship with pharma, right?
Right.
And creates narrative, creates titles for something, and then they have, so they've created, there's an observation in the field of some sort of mass this or that, maybe say attention. People are having all of a sudden trouble with attention because they created flicker rate issues with light and flash this and flash that, and that's all old school, by the way. And then so everyone has trouble concentrating, and then big pharma and psychology get together, and who had probably been in bed with the engineers of what was causing this, right? This whole Hegelian thing. And they create a new terminology. The psychological field stamps it. The pharmaceutical field says, we've got a pill for it. And then here's your solution. Here's the pill. One size fits all. And then you see the human experiment unfold. You see that we are not all the same, that we are all perceiving things differently, that our physiology is different, our genetics can waver, and we're understanding more about that every single day, especially when we start talking about parasites and the ability to change one's even blood type within the stomach, and this whole parasite thing's blowing up. And so you have a corralling effect, a manipulated corralling effect. And that's what makes this feel very agitating in the overall field. How is it that we could allow the ridiculousness of what went on in the last several years across the whole realm of countries that did not get along or told, to come together and say, look, we're going to weaponize the idea of the common cold. When flu and cold season comes around, we're going to just we're rebranding people. And in the rebranding, the softer side or the harder side of influenza, like they did with SEERS, the softer side of SEERS. And now here's the answer. Doesn't work like that. And people that understand that it doesn't work like that just by observation, mothers, for example, that deal with their kids, this little thing doesn't work for that kid, this little thing doesn't work for that kid, understands this principle of absolutes. But the world becomes self-consuming when you get a certain mass following an agenda. And I'm wondering if, and this is my question here now, long-winded as usual, do you think that algorithmic forces had a lot to do with this or a little to do with it? Do you think the algorithms in the digital world around us played a role in what we just went through?
Ooh, I don't really know what exactly that means. That I've got a view to share, but maybe you could first be a little bit more precise than the algorithms in the digital world.
Well, like a meme,
A meme.
say
Oh
when
yeah.
when when Elon Musk came to Twitter and he said, I need to see the receipts for how many bots are here. And it turned out Twitter was just absolutely parasite ridden with bots. No surprise to any of you techies out there.
I do that. Yeah, if I was trying to run the global conspiracy, I would absolutely get bots to argue with people on Twitter, because I know when they're arguing on Twitter, they're not changing the world, right? So that's a waste of time. And then people would get smart to that after a while. So I'd create a bot that said, "Wow, that's really interesting. Tell me about that, more about that. Wow, that's amazing. I've never seen it that way." And I'm afraid I'm giving them ideas. Anyway, the thing is, in some way, lockdown may have not been possible without the internet. People could order things from the house. A lot of
Yeah,
people could work from home. You
this
know,
is
in
what I
some
was getting at. Yes.
yeah, in some way, the technology. I mean, look, I like getting paid for nothing as well. So if the government's going to cut me a check to shut the fuck up, you know, that might help. Um, like then you've got porn, you've got Netflix, you've got Amazon Prime, you've got you can speak to your friends over Facebook Messenger. Like imagine if you didn't have, I love the technology personally, but imagine if you didn't have any of this stuff. Like would they have been able to, first of all, no one would have thought there was COVID, because if you look at the mortality rates for those years, they weren't any higher than in previous years. So if you went out, you just think there was a normal amount of sickness. Secondly, even if they could somehow propagandize people, they'd be like, look, there's only so much I can stay in the house without anything to do. And plus, if you don't work, you don't eat. You know, was it Malawi or something like that? They tried to impose lockdowns, and the people were like, "Are you nuts? If we don't eat, if we don't work, we don't eat." So they went on a protest, and they weren't able to lock them down because they knew, you know, and I think lots of people died in countries like India because of lockdowns, because in countries like that, people, you know, if you, you know, they don't have a developed economy to, and that's a whole nother level of it, right? What is the use of states if everyone is rich? If poor people reach a middle class income, they'll do what middle class people do. They'll take their kids out of school, and put them in a private school that's better, so the government doesn't need schools. They'll get their own health care, so you won't need Medicare and Medicaid and the insurance system. So you won't need the government for that. They won't go into the military because they're looking for a job or looking for a free education. You know, they won't commit crimes because most crimes are done by poor people. So if everyone gets rich, there's no need for government. Like, so part of me thinks that a big part of the COVID thing was just to destroy as much wealth as possible. And you can see it when you go to the shops. You know, when I first went to the USA in October of 2020, I thought groceries were way expensive compared to Scotland back then. Like, I mean, going grocery, I dare, you know, to imagine what going grocery shopping is like now in the USA. It's getting worse in Scotland as well, of course. It's getting worse in Mexico. I was in Mexico 3 years ago. It was so cheap here. Um, but like compared to then, I would say it's obviously less expensive than a Western country, but it's not cheap, not anymore.
But so let's look at this. And I like the technology too. I am not anti-technology, but I am against everything being used against me and people.
Exactly.
And so that's where I draw the line. That's where this
anti-technocracy.
Thank you, Jerry. That's
Beautiful
the
word.
truth. It's really where it is. It's been used. It's weaponized and used against us. But in the period of the Black Death, for example, you know, so they weaponized. So the stats here were that the common influenza went away and we had COVID. Like all of a sudden, you know, like you could see the numbers. Like where's the cold? The influenza went away and
Oh, because we wore masks is why. That was, people actually said that. Because everyone was masking, the flu went away. That was the actual alleged scientific explanation. Yet everyone still managed to get COVID.
Jerry.
They still managed to get fucking COVID.
Right. Yeah, I know. But here's the thing, going back to the cognitive dissonance thing, I don't know why I didn't make this example before. It's like, oh, get the vaccine. It'll stop you from getting it and it'll stop you from passing on to people. Oh, well, I mean, it won't stop you from getting it, but it will it won't stop you from passing it on to other people. Oh, it won't stop you from getting it either, but it will lessen your symptoms. Oh, and you need two of them. Oh, and you need a booster. Oh, and you need a second booster. It's like, I genuinely cannot believe that people didn't go, wait a minute, this is not what you told us. And also, you fired a bunch of my friends because, see, as soon as they said it doesn't stop transmission, even by their own bullshit, it's a personal issue. It's not a public health issue anymore. For crying out loud.
Well, yeah, I mean, the initial clinical studies, once they were published, were clear that it didn't stop transmission or infection. And on top of that, it became clear that they lied about the efficacy using a relative risk reduction percentage for efficacy versus an absolute risk reduction.
Right, which they do a lot in medicine.
Which they do a lot in medicine. And yeah, I mean, if anything, I think one of the biggest good things to come out of this is a lot more people are looking into childhood vaccination and the science around that.
Or the lack of science, you should say. Yeah, because I pack the organization that I teach the economics of healthcare reform course for. The guy who started that is the guy who designed the study that came out, I think, 2019. Thousands of children, I think over 4,000, they ranked them in terms of the number of vaccinations, and so some of them had 0, some of them had 75, and the more vaccines they had, the more asthma, the more colitis, the more go down all the chronic illnesses. And it was so convincing, that the study, because it was dose dependent. And the doctor, the pediatrician, the next day the medical board in Oregon took away his license for publishing a freaking study, right? That they'd asked him to publish. Right? No, it wasn't for that. They found another reason. They found a reason to take away his license, but it was obvious because he published the study. And it's really interesting because they asked him to do the study.
Look at all.
So they go at.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's cool. It's your turn.
No, I was going to say just look at all the doctors who were delicensed. What's the word for that? They had their licenses taken away in Canada for even suggesting there was a potential issue.
Yeah, and I've got a friend that's a doctor in Oxford that have women come in with messed up menstrual cycles, and he'd be like, was there anything that happened around the time you got that you started having the irregularities? And like, I don't think so. And he's like, are you sure? And they're like, well, I did get my COVID vaccine. Could it be that? And he's like, well, I'm not saying it, but who knows? And he could see on the record, time after time after time, they got the menstrual problems when they took the vaccine, and that's all he could say, really. He said it could be the vaccine, but you never know. But he wanted them to know,
Right, and that's
and he needs to be.
Dr. Naomi Wolf was one of the first people to bring that forward, the menstrual issues.
I mean, she's so brave. I mean, to come from being a mainstream leftist feminist to, to the stuff that she's done, I admire her greatly.
Yeah, and this is true of so many people that I don't think her politics in her head have changed. as far as what she believes. However, the party has moved so far to the left, it's pushed the Overton window far enough to make her a right wing in their eyes,
Well, she did say that she's become a bit more libertarian over the years. So, and I think that's because she learned about a bit of economics and saw, oh, right, yeah, no, markets are actually good for consumers and things like that, as long as they're free markets. But I think it's good when you find someone that's open-minded and willing to learn more and change. And it's even better still to find someone who's willing to make a heroic stance that costs them. Saying Trump sucks if you're a band is not a risk. The Dixie Chicks got taken off the radio because they said they were against the war in Iraq and insulted President Bush. They took a risk, right? In those days, the bands that were against the war were taking a risk. People who are saying, right, oh, go out and get vaccinated. Like, I mean, a band with a name called Rage Against the Machine.
Yes.
I cannot believe it. I loved it. When I was a kid, I was jumping up and down to their first album.
Johnny Rotten, too. He was the Sex Pistols.
Unbelievable.
Was all like, you got to be vaccinated. Arnold Schwarzenegger. People, so many people I admired for their work in the past totally blew it with me to the point where I can't watch
Dolly
them anymore.
Parton. Yeah. Dolly Parton. Like, I really admire her as an artist. All these people came out, and I mean, you really have to say shame on you to musicians and actors, because throughout history, these fuckers went to their little campsite with their 3/4 size guitar and sung Bob Marley, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery, none but ourselves can free our mind, and protest songs, and they're meant to say things that are unpopular. It was the responsibility of musicians to talk truth to power, and playwrights, and
journalists.
That you can have a career that involves you going on stage every night and fucking live somewhere like Vegas as a musician, or New York as an actor, or LA and not say, look, I live in a city that is world renowned for having a buzz, and I am not going to let you destroy the I'm not going to let you destroy the buzz, and these cities are destroyed.
What's destroyed? I'm sorry.
Well, just like the buzz and the buzz in cities that were world famous for being a great destination to visit.
Well, this goes back
and
to
people didn't protest them ruining the buzz. That's what I was saying.
No, you're absolutely right. And this going back to what you were saying about the destruction of people's livelihoods with lockdowns and stuff.
Right.
I think that was deliberate in order to get rid of a lot of small businesses that are, in the eyes of the government, uncontrollable. Like, they can't control them. They can control an Amazon. They can control Home Depot.
Yeah.
They can pull strings there. I shouldn't say control, but
yeah. I mean, close enough.
Yeah, but like mom and pop antique store, or quote unquote non-essential businesses, they have no say in how they operate. And I think one of the facets of this operation that went on was to destroy that echelon of businesses.
That's interesting, and and it definitely had that effect. And just think about it. It's like, oh, you're so selfish. What if someone gets COVID and dies, right? What if you spent 20, 30 years of your life building a business and you went out of business over lockdowns? Like, why did this not do you know what? I'm so shocked that we're still talking about lockdowns and how obscene they were so many years later. But this is like I notice I go into rant mode. I notice I sound stressed when I talk about it. So that makes me think, one, I didn't talk about it that often because I thought, what was the point? But that it really had a profound effect on me. The fact that I get so passionate and talking about it.
Well, there's a dynamic there. We went through something collectively that was a big deal. It was a big trauma event. No matter where you stood on it, no matter if you were for it or against it, we all were forced into a narrative, and we couldn't escape the narrative no matter what. And so it's still playing out. We're still coming to terms with what happened. And anyone that's gone through any small traumas, like even an accident or a heart incident, or, you know, just even a death, it takes time cognitively to process. And the more time we get away from what happened, the more clear it becomes, obviously. And then there's a snowball effect, because the more clear it becomes, everyone's coming to. It's like a bad trip, and we all start to talk about, whoa, did that really happen? So then we go like, yes, that really happened. And then we start tearing apart the controllers of the trip, the controllers that took us into this, when we can say, even if we were saying it's idiocracy to think you can walk through a room and have to have a mask on so that you can save yourself from COVID, but sit down and eat. We knew that back then. We knew that. Some of us were saying, this is ridiculous. I was one of these people saying it, and you both probably were as well. I said it in real time with friends that were like, I'm like, are you serious? We're going to walk through this restaurant with masks on and then sit down? I mean, and then, you know, it was like being told I needed to do that. And so we're being coerced into something is against our better judgment.
Like
so
pronouns.
Here, well, all of it, right? It all came on. It was all a big avalanche of stuff. And now that we have a little reprieve and we have a little breathing space, is when the conversation started to happen. And this is where the good stuff has started to come out, because more people that were in the moment and doubled down and bought it and played along with the narrative realized and are realizing in the current tense of it, that this was all an operation, and that this operation was done upon everyone, and that these people that actually capitulated to it were really duped. And people don't want to think that. And so then they had to look at, well, who duped us? And then they need to understand these people that they bought this story from, Dr. Faust, and who is Bill Gates to stand up to the whole world and tell you, anywhere where you stand in the world, this American tech giant, the real science of virology, of all this, and George Soros funding this, and Mr. Extreme, Dr. Evil over there, Klaus, you know, like all these characters in this great opera, this tragedy that we witnessed, are so dark, and yet they're so thin. And when they came together, we were bamboozled by it, and we can see that. So now the real discussion's happening. Now people are starting to be exposed for what they are. Everyone's nude in this. Some people are still doubling down because they are people that don't like to be wrong, or they are people that were part of it. Others, and a mass amount of others, are horrified that they did it or participated in any way. And it's created a bigger situation. And this is where I was trying to get at with the theater of the absurd, the theater of the world around us, and how we participate even as those in the viewing audience. You are a part of this theater. It takes the viewing audience to make the theater, the actors on the stage, real, to make it real. And this is where
there's a Simpsons episode like that.
It's right there. That's why people are still talking about it. They will be talking about it a long time. But we've seen this historically when they started dragging out controllers in different countries and different time periods and saying, your reign's over. And here's the guillotine. We don't care how glamorous you are. We don't care this or that. Even if some of those people were not to blame, the mass mindset goes for blood because blood was spilled on them because they were duped. And there's nothing like a population scorned to come after you if you are in control, if you are the ruler. And that's why you set in scapegoats. That's why you set in the great pretenders. This is why we saw a lot of shuffling in the royal families and in the governments and moving people in and out of areas, separating Harry from the royal family so that if the guillotines do come out, look, he's the great rebel. He said hell no to the Windsors and did all this. There's a bigger twist in this story, and that's what I'm trying to get at. What is it? Because we have come to a couple crescendos already, but there's a twist in the plot coming. And that's where I was trying to go earlier with your observation of theater and theatrical production. And I pointed us back to the Black Plague or the Black Death, because when you look at those historical records, we didn't have the internet then, allegedly. And we didn't have the technology then, allegedly. And so that it spread basically word of mouth, right? So these doctors and these ministers and all that would travel across Europe, and the death wasn't there yet in some of these accounts. And of course, they're saying, well, they spread it. But did they really spread it in a physical way, or was it more like the mind virus? Look, this is the plague. It's all over Europe. These are the symptoms. And now we're here to see, has anyone coughed strangely? Is this or that? And then, when we have the narrative that it comes from fleas, rats, and all this, but it was in the stories I've looked at was absolutely not in villages until all the propaganda got to villages. And it's just like the witch hunts, and it's just like all these other narratives pre-internet algorithmic experiences. So of course we're still talking about it, and of course we're still mad as hell because we need to be mad as hell. But the problem is, what is that a procession into? Where is this arc taking us, Anthony?
Well, I mean, that's for us to decide, isn't it? I think that one thing we can certainly say is it's an extremely interesting time to be alive. Like, I mean, what a trip. I'm kind of glad, yeah, I'm kind of glad I've been insulated from the worst of it. I got out of Scotland um, in the halftime of lockdowns when they opened up for a wee while before putting us back into lockdown. I had an online job, so I guess I'm pretty lucky. I got to kind of follow my nose and um, make my own destiny and travel and meet interesting people who disagreed with what was going on. When you said, where does it go? That's what I meant at the beginning when you were asking about the theater, which was we're trying to determine whether this is a comedy or a tragedy. Is it going to have a happy ending, or is it going to have a sad one? And sometimes just a day or a week or a period of your life ends in tragedy. Do you know what I mean? And you feel like everything's gone wrong. And then another period, you're like, it's definitely got a happy ending, it seems to. But there's no end in eternity. So it just keeps going. And it's more like tragedies and comedies because something else it's like it's an improvisation. It's like, well, I didn't like there's one thing, oh, and then there's the COVID curveball, all right, and then there's things are going this way, and there's the Trump curveball, and then things are going that way, and things were getting pretty good towards the end of the 90s in some ways with science and spirituality, and then 9/11 happens and it derails all of that, and then I don't know, sometimes good stuff happens. Like, who thought an anarcho-capitalist would be in in power in Argentina. Who could have guessed that weird lefty socialist feminist Sweden would have been the place that didn't lock down, and like New Zealand that had a massive deregulation in the 90s, which led to a massive period of prosperity, would be one of the most hardest regulating. I mean, that was really the worst when people were told they couldn't even leave their own country. Because for ages they told us, well, if you don't like the government, you can just leave. You know, if you don't like it, why don't you just leave? And then they actually said, you can't leave. I mean, it's such a violation. So that's the best
Australia
answer.
too was like,
Yeah,
no one could
exactly.
come or go. Yeah.
Exactly. They turned it into a prison camp again.
Yep. With legit prison camps built inside, quarantine camps in Australia and New Zealand, I believe, both had. If you refuse to get vaccinated or whatever, or you tested positive, they sent you off to that quarantine camp.
Incredible.
Yeah. China too. China had them too. Yeah, it was crazy shit that went down. And I was trying to interject here back when Nish was talking. One of the problem with not necessarily waking people up, but trying to explain how they've been fooled is damn near impossible now, because we've had 4 years of all these different authoritative figures coming out and putting out this narrative and reinforcing it. There are so many different things that occurred that all in combination resulted in where we are today. So to try and sit someone down, explain that all the things that happened, you know, this is how the tests were bad. This is how they miscalculated the death rates. This is how they mischaracterized deaths. This is why the PCR test can't, et cetera, et cetera. You know what I mean? There were so many unscientific things that happened that were pushed as science, that, which also fed into the cognitive dissonance issue. Remember, for instance, remember when natural immunity was a conspiracy theory?
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yes.
They came out and said natural immunity is the latest conspiracy theory from anti-vaxxers. It's like
they literally said that.
They literally said that. And if it wasn't for quote unquote natural immunity, vaccines would not work. Like the whole idea of vaccine science, whether or not it's legit, is a different story.
It's based on the idea.
It's based on the idea of natural immunity, that you have a natural immunity or your body can build one. Yeah, it's just like you're left without words, and you try and sit down to talk to someone about this, you don't even know where to start, because they don't know jack shit. Yeah.
That thing, natural immunity is a conspiracy theory. That's aimed at people who don't look into things, so that they just hear that. So that when one of their friends says, oh, but you know, natural immunity, blah, blah, blah. They've not looked into it, but they once heard somewhere someone saying natural immunity, it's a new conspiracy theory. And they just recall that and they say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. That is aimed at that shallow level of mind, you know?
Yeah, the people who just want to be right. They don't care if it's true. They just want to be with the correct group. Yeah, it's.
But meanwhile, if you were, say, like back to the Black Death, if you're in a village or if you're in a place, so I'm applying this to what just happened, though. If you were in a place and you weren't affected by the propaganda mill, you weren't affected by the mind virus of this, you would have been just fine. You would there because it wouldn't have affected you. This was, in essence, a mind virus that went around that commandeered the common influenza, and people still play into it. And then, as we've known researching since then, that there's a lot of technology that was actually involved with the way that electronic warfare can trigger these symptoms, any kind of symptoms in the body that mirror what we consider organic illnesses and symptoms of things like influenza and different things. They can target you. And this, of course, this has been in the realm of the crazy woo-woo conspiracy theorists until really now, in the modern tense, because Havana syndrome came out and now they're not denying Havana syndrome anymore. But what was Havana syndrome? What is Havana syndrome? It's electronic warfare. And there were and are ways to combat that. But that, again, was in the land of woo woo, just like when they twisted the idea of herd immunity. And so, if you're in this proverbial village that was not affected by anything prior, and some thought comes in, a parasite, a Pied Piper comes in and starts placing these seeds into your delicate little impressionable mind and ideas, you were going to be all right. Your village was going to be all right. If you were an elderly person that wasn't attached to any of this technology, you didn't even know something was going on until you tried to go to the store and they're like, wait, where's your papers? Or you want to go, it's all started in the mind. So much of this is completely psychological in nature that got everyone to participate in what became a grand working, which was the idea of a hive mind sickness here. And then it just snowballed and became what I would say is a most successful event, a most successful exercise by these monsters, if you will, that orchestrated it to see how well this stuff works on the masses. The joke was always on us from day one.
Absolutely. The whole, I guess we, like you said, we just keep on speaking about it because we're still mad as hell because it was so astonishing. It's like, it's a vortex that's consumed. I'm down here. I've met people in Mexico who lost their house, their beautiful apartment, their partner, their family, their job, and now they're living in America or Canada, and now they're living in Mexico. It was completely earth-shattering for some people.
Well, of course it was. You can't. It's this mob thing. You're doing your own thing. You're a midwife in the woods doing your own thing, and then the whole village comes at you with torches, and because you've been trying to do your own thing, and you can't do your own thing when you've got everyone weaponized against you. And so if you don't join the mob, then you're against the mob. And that's how this works. And it's a snowball effect. And so it is well oiled through history, and we see that it's even more toothy now with technology and how easy it is to get people to gild their own cages.
Correct.
A lot of people like me, who's a complete introvert, I didn't really get too affected by what was going on because I generally don't like being in mobs of crowds. I don't like going to the market and having people push me as I'm reaching for something on the shelf, have some pushy motherfucker push my hand away to grab what I'm grabbing for and stuff. That stuff did not happen in my early life. That stuff is new. But this kind of mentality that's going on, and it created this very selfish reality for a lot of people where social decorum fell apart. And when they were separating us 6 feet apart, thank you very much, which I actually enjoyed, it created a break in the psyche of what humans do, which is, in general, we need each other. We're around each other. We do need the warmth of others, even ones like me that prefer my space. But, we still have a functioning society if you are in a society. And so it fractured it at the core. It fractured all these societies at the core, even in small town, wherever. And that is going to be something, the little kids that went through this, they were entrained into this. They were brought into this. This is now a physical memory in their bodies, whether or not they remember it or not. They were entrained early on. And I postulate here that the bigger overture was that Jerry's meme here is exactly perfect. That the bigger overture here was that we could see how easy this is. And I'm stepping into the devil's advocate. We, as the people that did this, we can see how easy it is to actually corral the masses with very little effort. And in the modern day, as I brought up earlier, with algorithmic overtures guiding the narrative through memes, through bots, through in neuroscience they call them brainworms, just like you see in a catchy tune. It was really well played, and the damage is done. That's why we're still talking about it. But the young generations that came into this and were part of it, the damage is going to, the poisons will be hatching out.
It's generational for sure.
Yeah, the poisons will be hatching out. This was a seed planted. And these engineers, these maestros, if you will, these directors of the play know this, and are counting on that. They are not thinking in terms of a decade. They're thinking in terms of long-term growth, long-term movements. And these are the same people that got us into the idea of World War I and the idea of World War II and the bullshit around Vietnam and Bay of Pigs, all this stuff. They are moving like directors of this opera we're watching. And like any good Shakespearean play, there's a whole bunch of realism. It's gritty. There is a hero here, but there's a hero there. There's an anti-hero. There, a lot of people are going to die. Some won't. There's betrayal. There's heartache. And that's what makes this more dynamic than, say, something very simple and than a simple 3-minute TikTok clip. This is going to play out into our future. Meanwhile, Act 4 is getting set up. And what's that Act 4? Because what I'm noticing is that a lot of people are getting very comfortable with themselves right now, with the way it is. They're just accepting that, okay, thank God we're not locked in. Thank God we can go to the store. Thank God we don't have to wear masks, even though a huge amount of people still wear masks. And so in the mix, they gave away so much to get so little back that when this next act comes in, and the fourth act is usually the bloodiest, it's going to be a sight to behold, because in the process, young people were entrained and they're going to triple down.
And what have they been entrained into, and what are they going to triple down on?
Compliance.
Okay, so you're talking about an out and out 1984, like, you know, because that was the thing. They always said that. I wonder why that bell went after you said compliance.
It's our synchro bell.
Your
Jerry and I
bell.
said that
Whenever
synchronicity
we
bell.
have a synchro, I ring it.
Like, because you both said compliance at the same time.
At the same time, yeah.
That's yeah. I thought it was quite a beautiful moment and quite scary. It's when you rung the bell, it was almost like you were under a hypnosis and you were
in training,
like, you were like positive reinforcement. You're like whatever
yes,
it is.
Pavlovian.
Yeah, you're anchoring the idea of compliance. Yeah, so I guess we've got a responsibility to step out one by one and make the bet most of our own lives and in a way that helps others. And because you can't take, that's the thing. One of the signals that the governments didn't actually care about health is, I don't really believe in government, right? But if you're going to have a government, then it should at least do what government pretends to do, pretends its job is. So you would have created a little pamphlet called Your Immune System, and you would have posted it through every door in the country with evidence-based information on how to keep healthy. Even mainstream sources admit that 70% of diseases lifestyle related. It's probably more like 98%. Um, like, and even those that aren't, like, obviously, if you don't take care of your health, your condition is going to be worse. They didn't do anything to encourage people to improve their health, improve their natural immunity, so to speak.
In fact, everything was contrary to
yeah,
healthful
you can't get
living.
any sunlight.
No.
You can't get any, you need
Exercise,
exercise,
fresh air,
oxygen,
good
fresh air.
food, fresh food. I
Yeah,
know.
fresh food. So, that was the one indication that it didn't really care how unhealthy you are. I mean, so how healthy or unhealthy you are. So, yeah, so it's like for each of us, we don't really you can't really do much about the BPAs and you can get a filter to filter your water. They're spraying stuff with glyphosate. They're putting so many toxins into our food, air, and water supply, and you're like, is this like, how is this just, right? See if you can go out, like, see if other people want to eat produce that's sprayed with poison, that's fine. But why can't I go into a supermarket and see something that's labeled organic and know for a fact that it's not going to poison me? Is this part of the psyop? Like, why is that even allowed in the universe? One has to ask, like, that we've got that our free will can be violated so greatly that you can think that you're doing a good thing for yourself and not even know if you're right or not.
Well,
You can't.
so so part of this, and I don't know if this is adding to what you just said or if I'm just backtracking a little,
Sure,
but
I'm just interested.
this idea of the isolation that happened through this
Mhm.
grand ritual that happened, what happened in that process? So people didn't feel isolated because of what? Because of the internet and
Right.
because of AI companions. And I'm not talking about the way I talk about AI, but because you could go on and you could get all your answers digitally through
Mhm.
digital AI, through,
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. And you could, people, gaming industry boomed, and these kinds of escapism things boomed because you could fulfill your need to, like I was talking about with this isolation aspect, to feel isolated and alone. And now with the different kinds of simulations out there through
Mhm.
the AI revolution
Mhm.
or takeover, you can get sympathy where you want sympathy. And
Mhm.
well, anything. If you're into being dominated, you can have a dominatrix AI lover online,
Mhm.
and or
Hey,
on your
where?
phone.
That sounds hot.
Right, shut up and eat, you worm. And
Oh, nice.
you know you
Yes,
know
mistress.
exactly, don't call me mistress, now kiss my arse. And
It's goddess to you.
Oh,
right,
okay.
so you can get it tailor made,
Oh, okay.
to you and fulfill that which you were getting, maybe not even to your liking in your organic life
Yes,
before.
you're hitting it. Yeah,
You
it's
see what I'm
exactly like
saying?
life is hard, right? But here's one of the reasons why I think video games are so addictive. Because in life, everything gets hard before it gets easy. If you go and learn a new sport or a new language, it's like you don't know anything. It's But as you keep on learning, it kind of gets easier and you start to get the hang of it. Um, Especially social situations. Oh my God, like do they send like someone into school, like you guys hang out and stuff like that. You're like, oh my God, like go out and get some social skills. Okay, now it gets easier and easier. In a video game, they make it so the first level's the easiest, and the second level's slightly harder, and the third level's slightly harder, and the fourth level's slightly harder. So you've entered this artificial world where it's always the optimal level of challenge for your skill level, and you're like, wow, yeah, I'm really doing good, great here. It's like you're saying they're taking that to the extreme because you're right about relationships. Relationships have never been easy, but you're talking about a generation who grew up with social media and didn't actually have to go into the world to interact with a human to learn all the social cues that those of us that were born before the internet like got at least a little bit of time to experiment around with. So, and also the consequences are if you come on to a girl and you do it unskillfully, not only might she reject you, which is bad enough if you don't have very much self-esteem, she might tell her friends, no, everyone thinks you're a perv. Okay, I think
Yes.
I'm just going to take the AI girlfriend because she's
Yes.
definitely going to reject me. And I'm definitely not going to say anything she doesn't like, that she's like words going to get around. So they're taking all, and there's no risk, with porn. You don't need to please your partner. You can just think about yourself. You can just think about your own pleasure and your own imagination. You're not going to risk um doing something, not being aggressive enough. And she thinks, oh, it would have been, she goes off with some alpha male that was more assertive than you, or like being too aggressive and her being like, okay, I didn't like that. Oh shit, what am I meant to do with this situation? So you're talking about they're luring people into a world with the with sugar, the temptation of ease. It's the apple, oh, take a bite of this, you know it's tempting, but yeah, you're
It
gonna
is.
lose. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go on,
You're
go on.
you're right on, and it's what you want, and we see this, and it was imperative
Hmm.
to make this fracture a hard fracture, which is what
Hmm.
happened in this experiment we all went through, where we were also isolated, and it was insidious because this whole thing, if you recall, you may not recall, but there was a whole push for vaccines. There was a whole smallpox scare here prior to that. And it started to bring up old wounds about who's for vaccinations and who's not. And this was prior to
Hmm.
this. And it was a big deal here in America. And I don't know how far and wide that went, but it started to bring up these old
Hmm.
wounds. And in this fracturing of our collective psyche, of our personal makeup, we started to see lovers separate because
Hmm.
they were either for this or not for that. Families break up. The isolation became incredible.
Hmm.
And then what do you have? You have the obvious, the solution, and that was going into the digital mediums to
Hmm.
find your
Hmm.
community, find where you want. But
Hmm.
that's not enough. So see, now they start
Yeah.
pushing people in real online communities apart by all
Hmm.
kinds of
You've
means.
done
And then
so
But
smart.
that's all just the the collective push towards transhumanism.
that's what I'm saying, Jerry.
Yeah,
So
Hmm.
it's
all of
the
this feeds into
continue
that.
the
Yeah.
separation. So the separation went from in person, your personal lives, your interactions out in the world, to your
Yep.
personal relationships online with real people,
Yep.
but online and digitally, and started separating those communities. And we've all seen this,
And
and
then
how these communities, and then just go straight into fuck it, I'm going digital all the way.
right.
Because these AI systems are so good now that you can get what you want. And now you've got the goggles, and now you've got augmentation, and you've got all this more human than
Hmm.
human that's really truly out there, but it needed to separate. We needed to be cleaved away from each other for this to come in. And it's very sophisticated.
That was just the first step, though.
Right.
The second step is blurring the gender lines. This is all in preparation for you to accept your cyborg body.
Yeah, absolutely.
That has no gender.
Well, it couldn't, because it's a cyborg,
Right.
and so it's not even organic, and so that's why.
Snap! I thought I was going to get a bigger one.
Well, you could have you could.
You got to pay extra for that. You got to rent it. It's a monthly fee. You loan nothing, and you'll be happy with your 12-inch cock.
I thought it was so good. Go on.
I'm just gonna be bad, but the thing is, this had to happen in a certain way. It had to have a cadence. It had to have a pace, and otherwise it wasn't going to happen. This was all manufactured from day one. And that's why, back to the original story of, you can walk through a restaurant with the mask on and not worry about COVID because you're masked, and sit down and not worry, take the mask off and not worry, because whatever that is, it lingers at that, the 5.8, whatever height, the ridiculousness of all that we were questioning. And it was never about that. It was never about that. It's about where we are now and where we're going, which is the fourth act. And the fourth act is what? The four is the what creates the main floor of a plane, of a field. And from that field, from that plane, you can scaffold up, you can build up. And this is digital language. And so you can get whatever you need. You don't need anything outside of it. And as Jerry said, the whole thing, you will have nothing and be happy, because everything technically will be digital, online, or connected to you in the most horrific of ways, getting bio hooked in vis-a-vis whatever form you want, because there's human now, AI humane. There's the stuff that Elon Musk is pushing to get your brain all hooked up. It doesn't matter. Choose your direction. It's a flavor. It's a fashion. It's a brand, whatever you want, but it's taken you separate. And it's separated you, it's isolated you from everything that you actually knew prior to now. And it gives you exactly what you want and what you need, even the conflict and friction you need. Some people need contrast and friction. Some people just want the feel goods and ride-alongs and the luxury of it all. We're all individual, and this absolutely is tailor-made for you, Anthony.
For me? Wow, that's fantastic.
I've just sold you, so sign here below on the dotted line.
What do I have to sign away?
Well, first it's just a little prick to the finger. We need your DNA signature.
We're running up on time here.
We are.
And I have a few questions for you from the audience.
Sure.
Number one.
Wow, amazing. I love questions from the audience.
Number two, well, it's just from Oswald. Number two, I wanted to talk about your fertility clinic. Or I want to give you time to talk about it.
Retreat. Yeah.
So go ahead and why don't you do that, and we can do the questions.
Lightning round. Oh, okay. So let's just not talk about how, like, a lot of things we've pointed out, toxins. One of the sometimes side effects of this jab seems to be that people can't have babies. We're actually in the middle of a fertility crisis where with 1 in 6 people failing to conceive. So we're basically running a retreat, like a detox retreat, because a lot of the time, my teachers taught me that all disease derives from the underlying condition of the body. On the cellular level, healthy cells build healthy tissues build healthy organs build a healthy body, and a healthy body can conceive. And I've seen people reverse conditions like colitis, type 2 diabetes, even cancer, with protocols like the one that we're going to do. Because what we want to do is get all the toxicity out of the cell and put all the nutrients that the cell needs to build healthy tissues into the cell. We're marketing it as a fertility retreat, although, people might come along to get rid of their skin problems or other things as well. But because lots of people might know someone a couple who are really trying to have babies. So if that's interesting to you, I got the greatest domain name ever for it. youcanconceiveit.com. youcanconceiveit.com. And it's going to be here in Ixtapa, Mexico. Starting in April or May at push. There's different start dates, so you could come April or May and learn Spanish, I guess, yoga, juices, amazing tropical fruit, excursions, meet other people who are into this stuff, as in living the best possible life you have, and not just talking about it, but your body's a temple. The fight back, part of the fight back is not being sick, is being healthy, is being in a community where you can focus on becoming the best version of yourself so that you can manifest what you want to in this world, in this lifetime. So if you'd like to come with me and have an amazing time, become healthier than you've ever been in your life, and possibly have a baby, youcanconceiveit.com. Or message me personally if you're interested in detox and remineralization retreats such as this. Pass it on to your friends. If you know someone that it could help, youcanconceiveit.com. So that's the plug. Now we're doing the questions from the audience.
Yeah, so let's see how I can organize these. Have you ever considered moving to Japan?
What for? See if the questioner can give you us more details. It doesn't appeal to me personally, but I mean, you could sell it to me.
I don't know why he asked it. Do you know? Are you familiar with Dr. Andrew Kaufman and his work?
Yes, I met him once 2 years ago. Not far away from here, 5.5 hours in the bus, in Acapulco. Yeah, I'm familiar with him.
What do you think about his terrain theory thoughts?
Probably true. I personally don't cover the no virus stuff in my writing, and the reason for that is my shtick is taking mainstream sources and demonstrating that mainstream sources say that pharmaceuticals are harmful. So because I can't really find the mainstream sources saying there's no viruses, I don't really talk about it. But that doesn't mean that I don't necessarily think it's true. Is this, and sometimes I wonder if it's like what do they call it? A Mandela effect.
Mandela effect, yeah.
Yeah, where viruses used to exist, but they don't anymore. Did you ever think of that?
I never thought about it in those terms because so many. It's not like it's like a reverse Mandela effect. People are realizing that the whole science behind viruses is bullshit.
Right. Well, what I'd say is viruses might exist, but no one's ever proven them to.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good take on that.
Or at least not in the public domain. Maybe they secretly did, and that's how they knew about them.
Yeah, and no virus has ever been shown to be contagious and cause disease.
But that's very difficult to prove because see, if you have two people in the same room, it's like a kind of post hoc propter hoc thing where you say, well, I sneezed and then that guy went away and got a cold. It looks like contagion, but it's very, very difficult to prove.
Well, the study I saw is where they took viral material and inserted it into someone's nose and could not make that person sick with this influenza virus. But yeah, I know. It's all new, and if terrain theory is true, it's not based in material science, so that's a problem right there. Right. The material science is never going to be able to go there and examine it because it's not it's based on field theory or
Yeah.
whatever.
Well, a good
Unless they
website.
can find some money out of it.
Even then, they can't define it with science because you can't measure it.
Right.
Can't measure your
Well, good.
aura, your electric field. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, not at all. Well, a good website is terrainscience.com, and I know it's a good website because my articles get printed there. So that's good.
All right, I'll put a link to that in chat for everyone. There you
Mm.
go. The other question, two more. What's your take on Christian Northrup?
Christian Northrup.
Dr. Christian.
I'm sure I've heard of him before, but I don't
It's a
know
her.
Christian Northrup.
How dare you misgender her?
I know. Women's health. Oh, maybe I heard her on a podcast. Not very. I don't have one.
Okay.
I can't comment on someone that I'm ignorant of.
All good. Final question, and thank you for all these questions, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
Oswald. Were you raised in any particular religious faith?
Okay, I am, one of the tribe. Sorry, for those listening, I'm
Good for you.
making like I don't. So I came from a Jewish background. My mum's actually from Israel for her sins. My dad is Scottish, was born in Scotland, but 4 generations back, Ukrainian. And that's gave me some quite interesting insights. And like like the Jewish culture is a very strange culture. On one hand, they have very good humor. On the other, I feel like it might be less so now because I'm 38. But when I was a child, I very much felt like Judaism, what it was all about, the more of a victim you are, the more praiseworthy you are. And that's such a bad outlook on life. And because if you believe that, then you'll be unconsciously finding ways to make yourself a victim.
Yep.
And yeah, I don't know. I have this stereotypically crazy Jewish mum, and yeah, so I wasn't really. My parents weren't really religious, but they liked to do the festivals for tradition,
Mm-hmm.
and it was interesting. One of the most I like the old te stories from the Old Testament very much. I found them very, very interesting and enjoyable, and yeah, but I'm not very religious. I'm just a bit spiritual, yeah.
The Old Testament's juicy. I
Mhm,
was
for sure.
when I went and started reading it, I was like, my God, they've got it all. Talk about
Yeah,
an opera.
yeah.
So I love that you are, I just want to put this out here, Anthony. I love that you are out there offering solutions to
Mhm,
problems that are out there for people, that are really truly out there for people, having in the aftermath of this big thing that happened. And this is something we always like to end on. I like to end on the good stuff
mhm,
and all that. But it is important that we do look at all of the fuckery, all of the
mhm,
darkness, and how we ended up in this position to begin with, which is not just the last 4 years. It's been a long legged steer job, a long legged corralling to get us here. So the fertility situation is
mhm,
acute. It's a big
mhm,
deal right now.
mhm.
And that you're helping people find solutions in this department is a good offering to humanity.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank
Yeah,
you for that.
because to me the same that is being caused by the same things as is causing most of the chronic diseases. Like you can go for IVF treatment, might cost you 15 to $25,000, 15 to 20% chance of success. But if your body is toxic and malnourished, even if it succeeds, you're not creating a good life for the next generation because they're going to inherit the cellular condition of your body. So this is this is going to the cause of the problem and reversing it. improving the quality of cells so that the next generation is better than the previous generation. And that goes both the next generation of cells and the next generation of humanity. If, I mean, I just know we're going to have so much success with getting people pregnant on after this protocol. So once we've got those, I mean, it's probably blow up because it's the kind of thing that gets around. Oh, I couldn't have a, and then I came and did this, and now I could. So yeah, this is the problem. This is what everyone's going to have to face up to it sooner or later. Are the cells in your body getting healthier, better nourished, more better hydrated? Are they generating or are they degenerating? Because if they're degenerate, and this is the thing, most Americans are on 5 or 6 pharmaceuticals by the time they're 60. If that was working, then by the time they were 70, they'd only be on 2 because they'd be getting better. People are getting worse, not better.
Yes.
That doesn't have to be the case. We have protocols which are tried and tested that will help your body do what it's meant to do, which is clean the crap that shouldn't be inside it out of it and get the nutrients into the cells so that you can build healthier tissues. So that's what I'm working on, getting people down here April and May to improve the cellular condition of their body. We're going to train the freedom warriors.
Well,
So
that's excellent.
yeah,
I can tell you that I personally know several people that are having the worst luck with trying to have babies, lots of
right.
miscarriages and
I'm
all this
sorry.
stuff. It's insane.
Well,
I
I'm
mean,
telling you, it's not luck. It's because
yes.
see if it's luck, then that's just shit and they just have to accept it. Because it's not luck, there is something they can do about it. And I just want to make people aware of that. And they can decide if they're able to take enough time off work or whatever to come to a retreat and see if they can reverse the condition.
Back in the day, in my day, I'm Gen X, it was like all you could do not to get pregnant. I mean, everybody's
Right,
getting pregnant.
exactly.
So it was
Exactly.
like
So it's
if
like
a
you
dick looked
better
at you the wrong way.
exactly. You better wear a condom, everyone told you.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it
I
has
mean,
gotten
it was a
control.
thing.
Yeah.
So this is great, and I think that more people are realizing and at least recognizing that there is a fertility issue going on,
Yeah.
and especially those people that have been trying and thought, and there was no history in their family of
Hmm.
any issues. And of course,
Hmm.
as this is happening, they're realizing that this may in fact be part of what had just gone down, and that's a
Hmm.
harder pill for some to swallow. But again, you have some solutions, and those solutions are helping people. So again, give us information for the website. How do people find you there? And thank you for coming to the show with Jerry Cthulhu and I.
Uh, it is such a great pleasure. I've listened to you guys here in Mexico, Scotland. I remember distinctly listening to an episode of Obelisk in Rishikesh, India last year. So um you guys have traveled with me, so it's good to travel a little bit with you. Um
Thank you.
you can you can conceive it as the URL for detox retreats. Detox and remineralization retreats, I should say. You can get my free ebook, 7pharmamyths.com. If you want to book me as a therapist, you can book a consultation with me at beyourselfandloveit.com. What more do you need than that?
Absolutely. That's everybody say love. It's been a real pleasure having you on. You're fun to chat with.
Yeah, thank you.
You obviously you have a good sense of humor,
Hmm.
which we love here.
Oh yeah.
And you are perfect here. And thank you for being on the journey with us, listening to us in different places.
Yeah,
That
Hmm.
warmed my heart to hear that.
Hmm. Hmm.
it's awesome.
And thank you both. And I yeah, what more could you ask for? It was a wonderful show, exceeded expectations. I didn't know we'd go for 2 hours, but it was effortless.
Jerry and I always go for 2 hours. We're just getting warmed up in the first hour, baby.
So when you have some success stories from your clinic, please come back and we can talk about it.
Yeah, that would be fucking awesome. Yeah. Oh, I'll be shouting it from the rooftops because I've been writing about the pharmaceutical industry for a couple of years. So it's good to be able to actually do something about it, not just say this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You have an open invitation, and as well at the Cosmic Salon also.
Oh man, I'm looking forward to that show. Please.
Are you booked at the Cosmic Salon?
No, I'm asking you to book me.
Oh, reach out to. I have a booking agent. I have
who?
Or Jerry, get it. It's I'm not doing my booking. Every time I do, I mess it up. So, just reach
We'll
out
sort
to
this out. Yeah.
thecosmicsalon.com, and if you just go, there's a tab for bookings, and reach out, and Meredith will get you on the books.
Meredith.
Oh, I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I don't have a show booked yet because I have to read a book, and then I'm going to book the show.
But see, that says everything, Jerry. You're reading the book.
Yeah, I am. Robert Guffey sent me a copy of his new novel, and we're going to talk about it. So,
awesome.
It's called Dead Monkey Rum.
I have no idea about this, so I'll just wing it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So,
thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nish.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Take care.